Okay, here's your feedback on 4. There's an A, our B is 1, C is pi over 2, and then our D value is -1, meaning that's a vertical shift, so down 1. That does change our midline. We're going to see that happening on our graphs. We'll actually draw the new midline to help us with the graph. Okay, remember when we add things with horizontal shifts, you add it and move it to the left. Okay, C over B is what it says up here, right? C over B, so that C value divided by a B value of 1. Okay, and then our period is 2 pi, amplitude 1/2. Okay. All right, pause if you need more time to correct things. I'm moving on. All right, what I want to do now is 5 I'm going to use maybe for warm-up tomorrow. Let's cross out 6, and what I want you to do is write down the success criteria for these graphs we're going to do in the next page. It's a big part of your quiz this week. So just write this down, success criteria for graphing, sine and cosine graphs. All right, I have them right here on a separate sheet of paper. So here they are. And I'm going to go kind of quick to keep the video slow, so pause it if you need to. But I'm going to explain it real quick and what this means. First, we're going to do what we just did on this page we just left off with examples 1 through 4. Find the amplitude. We got to consider if there's a reflection or not. Period, phase shift, and vertical shifts. Okay, we haven't had to find the tick marks yet. I already kind of covered it though in the second column. Calculate tick marks, or sometimes called the scale marks. And what we do is we take whatever period we found in the first step and we're going to divide that by 4. It's just a good, convenient way to break it up, and it gets the maxes and the mins and the midlines. Okay, and then we'll consider the key points of the parent function along with the starting point. Because remember, sine starts at the origin and cosine starts up at 1 on the y-intercept, okay? So we got to remember the starting point. You'll get used to it. And then both of them, sine and cosine, follow this pattern of midline, and then it goes either up to a max or it goes down to a min, and then it goes back to the midline, then it goes back to one of the max or mins, and so on, okay? All right, so I'm going to move on. Pause to write that down if you need to. Okay, we're going to start with example 7. Okay, so here we go. Getting into these graphs, determine the amplitude and period and vertical shift of the function, which is step 1 of my success criteria, along with the tick marks in step 2. Okay, then graph, we're actually going to do 2 periods, okay? So let's cross this out, but 2 periods of the function. We'll ask you for 2 periods on your quiz as well and on your OTI, okay? All right, so let's get started with number 7. Amplitude is always the absolute value of A. So that's 3. And there's no reflection this time. Since it's positive, it will just continue with the same pattern of the original parent function, except it has a higher height. Okay, keep in mind, amplitude is the height from the midline to the top. So we just changed that from a height of, that from the midline up to the top, a height of 3. Okay, so that's going to be reflected in our graph, or it's going to show up in our graph. Okay, let's go on to period. Period is always 2 pi over b. So 2 pi divided by b, and b is 1. Okay. All right, there is no vertical shift. There is no phase shift to report, right? I don't have a C value. It's 0. B is 0, so there's nothing there. All right, let's move on to tick marks or scale marks. These little tick marks down here, we're going to figure out how much we're going to increase them by, okay? And the process is to always take the period and divide it by 4, or quarter periods. So whatever I got for the period, I'm going to throw in right here and divide it by 4. Okay, so 2/4 is going to be pi over 2. All right, so what I want to do is increase each of these tick marks by pi over 2. Now, these are common angles, so it's hopefully pretty easy for some of you just to add pi over 2 to get to pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. But if that's hard to do, you can just create multiples off to the side. So this is the first pi over 2, for example. So I have 1 pi over 2. Okay, then I need to get on to the second pi over 2. and then I'm going up to the third pi over 2, and then I get to another 4 pi over 2. Kind of like that. You just got to increase by 1 pi over 2 each time, and then just reduce what you can. Okay, we can reduce the 2 over 2, right, to just 1 pi. 3 halves is reduced, so I keep that 3 pi over 2, and then 4 over 2, of course, can be reduced to 2 over 1, or just 2 pi. But like I said, these are common angles. This is the 90, the 180, 270, 360 in radians. Okay. All right, and then with practice, you'll get better at that. It goes pretty smoothly. We need 2 periods, so I could go all the way to 4 pi in this direction, but I have more room on the graph to go backwards. So let's just go back. 2 tick marks is negative pi, so I'm just going to do every other now. And then negative 2 pi. Okay, that way I'll have 2 full periods now. Okay, here's what you should do. Until you get used to having this sine function memorized, you're going to want to probably draw the parent function on there first. The directions don't say we have to draw the parent function, but it's going to be a useful tool. So I'm going to start by remembering its key starting point. Remember, its origin here for sine, cosine's up as 0, 1. Okay, so I'm just going to do that first. Okay, so 0, 0, and then the pattern is, remember the success criteria I gave you, just start following the pattern once we understand the starting point. Okay, it's starting at the midline right now, and then it's going to go up to either a max or min. For sine, okay, it goes up to a max right away from the parent function. Okay, and then it goes back to midline, and then down to min, back to midline. So this is here, then here, then here. Remember, it's a wave. It's not a zigzag. You shouldn't have sharp turns. These computer images show you how they are smooth turns. Okay, I'm just going to highlight this so we know it's kind of separate from the rest of the graph. Okay. All right, so now that's the parent function. The only thing that's changing, this is a real basic one, as you can see and peek to the next pages, they get a little more complicated. But this one only is stretched by a factor of 3. That's what this does. It stretches the graph, makes it taller. Okay, so it's still going to start here, but at this next mark, it's going to have a height of not 1, but up 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then keep following the pattern again. So that's the maximum. It's going to go back to the midline. And then since the wave, this is, a continuous wave, the minimum would make sense. But the minimum has to have a height of 3 again from the midline. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, back to midline. So here is the graph with an amplitude of 3. Okay, makes sense? Just stretched. That's why they call it a vertical stretch. Or if that number was like 0.5, it'd actually compress it, make it smaller in terms of its height. Okay, so now that I have 1 period, getting 2 periods is pretty easy. I just got to continue that cycle in this direction. So since it's went from max to midline, the next tick mark must be the minimum. Okay, and then the next one must be midline again, back to maximum, back to midline. Same pattern, just going in this direction. And then connect the dots with the wave. Okay, and then just make sure this kind of makes sense, right? I've got 1 cycle, and then I've got a repeat up. Okay, let's see if you can do a little of the work on number 9. I want you to try to find all this stuff on paper first. Get it going, see if you can get the tick marks. This has a vertical shift, so it's a little bit differently. So before you graph it, let me help you, but why don't you try to write down some of that stuff first, okay? Pause and try. All right, so the period stayed 2 pi again because the b was 1. And then our tick marks are pi over 2 again. So we go up pi over 2 to pi to 3 pi over 2 and to 2 pi. And then let's go back in the other direction again. Okay, now here's the new part about this one. The vertical shift kind of picks it up and moves it down. So imagine what that would look like. Remember, our parent function has a midline at y equals 0, but if I pick this up and move it down and set it back down, that midline is going to move with it. So we'll be at y equals -4. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Vertical shift Whatever that D value is, that is your new midline. I think you should always draw it in there. Okay, so since it went down 4, our new midline is at y equals -4. Up here is at y equals 0. Right? You can really see it. Here, since it's not along the x-axis, I think you should draw it in there. So this is what I mean by that. Right here at -4, let's do this. Okay, it kind of serves as your new x-axis, if you will. I know it's not the x-axis, but it's kind of the midline for you to start your pattern again. Okay, so this is still sine. If it was cosine, I'd start up 1. But since it's sine, it still kind of starts at the origin, but the origin was shifted down. So it still starts on the midline for sine as it did here. I'm not going to do the parent function this time because we have our eyes on it right here. So I don't really need to do it again. Okay, what does it do next? It goes up to the maximum next, but it has to have a height of 2 from the midline. So this next tick mark, which is right here, up 2. There we go. There's the max. Follow the pattern. Next tick mark right here, it's going to go back down to the midline. Next tick mark, it's going to go to the minimum, which is a height of 2 again. So I'm going to extend this y-axis, -5, -6. That's where it will go down to. Okay, so that's the pattern. Then it's got to go back to the midline. So there's our sine graph, stretched by a factor of 2, shifted down 4 units. You kind of see what's happening from there to there, right? Stretched 2, picked it up, 4 units, set it down. And there she is. Okay, so that's one cycle. We just got to kind of track backwards now. So this must be going down to a minimum at this next tick mark right here. So it's got to be here. Next one, it's going to be back to midline. Next tick mark, back to max. There we go. Okay. All right, I don't want to do too much. I've already done a lot today. Stop there. I do give you one cosine today in your OTI, so just remember it starts here at a max instead of starting at the midline, okay? All right, that's it for today.